Her story really begins in Alaska, though I suppose it's also mine. My own son raised his hand to me and spat out words I never thought I'd hear. This isn't your home anymore. Get out. It happened right after my husband's funeral. So I left, though not without taking something important with me, the mortgage. By the next morning the locks worked fine, but the bank was a different story. Those words, "This isn't your home anymore," cut deeper than the slap itself. His hand cracked against my cheek with a violence I never believed he had in him. Not against me. Not against his mother. And yet there it was. In our living room. Not even 5 feet from the casket where his father still lay, surrounded by wilting lilies and the hushed whispers of mourning relatives. My cheek burned not just from the hit but from the betrayal behind it. I can still hear his voice, sharp and seething. I said it clearly, didn't I? Get out. He sounded like a stranger, cold and deliberate. Behind him, his wife stood smug, arms folded, chin lifted, the faintest smirk tugging at her mouth. She had always acted like the house belonged to her. Always looked at me as though I was some visitor overstaying my welcome in my own home. But I was the one who had given life to that boy. I was the one who held his hand when he sobbed over broken toys, patched up scraped knees, soothed him through his first heartbreak. I defended him in school when the principal tried to pin something on him unfairly. I pulled double shifts to cover his tuition when his father lost his job. I did all of that, and I never once asked for a thank you. No. Now he was shoving me out. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Shock built a wall so thick inside me that no tears could escape. I met his eyes and refused to look away. He blinked first. Because in that moment I wasn't just a grieving widow, or even a disrespected mother. I was something stronger, something steadier, something he hadn't counted on. So I turned. Silent. My suitcase was already sitting in the hallway, still half-packed from my husband's last hospital stay just a week before. I dragged it toward the door, each step echoing on the hardwood floor we had laid down together 37 years ago. I didn't take everything. Not the photo albums, not the ceramic angel my mother had given me, not even the quilt that had warmed me through countless winters. But I did take one thing they'd regret losing: the mortgage. The cold air outside hit me hard, but it was gentler than my own son's hand. Snow was starting to fall, soft flakes clinging to the folds of my black coat. I didn't brush them off. Somehow they made me feel alive again. I walked down the driveway, past the car my husband and I had finally paid off, past the rose bushes we planted on our 20th anniversary, past the wind chimes that used to sing whenever Andrew came home from school. No one followed me. No one stopped me. Not even him. At the corner I pulled out my phone and called for a taxi. While waiting I sat on the bench near the gas station. The teenage clerk inside, someone I once baked cookies for at Christmas years ago, stepped outside and asked softly, "Ma'am, are you okay?" "I'm fine," I lied. "Just waiting for a ride." "Do you want to wait inside where it's warm?" he offered. I nodded and followed him. He didn't press me for answers. He didn't even stare at the bruises already blooming on my face. Later I checked into a motel. The room smelled faintly of bleach and loneliness, but at least the heater worked and the bed was clean. The receptionist, kind enough, offered me tea and a blanket. I turned both down. Instead I lay on the bed for hours, staring at the ceiling. The sting I felt wasn't from his slap, it was from his words. "This isn't your home anymore." That house wasn't just walls and a roof. I had scrubbed its floors, cooked in its kitchen, prayed in its rooms. I had helped pay for it, fought for it, lived in it. It was my life. And yet I was told to abandon it as if it were just another suitcase. But I hadn't told them everything. They didn't know that the mortgage wasn't only in my husband's name. They didn't know I was still on it, co-signer, co-owner, because my husband had thought ahead. He knew what could happen. And one of the last things he said to me, his voice trembling, was, "If I go first, don't tell Andrew about the documents. Not unless he hurts you." I tucked those documents away in a safe deposit box at the bank along with other things. A letter he wrote me, a backup will, and a clause that would turn everything upside down. The very next morning I picked up the phone, not to call Andrew but to call the bank. I told them to stop the automatic mortgage payments. I gave them my ID, my name, the account number. They confirmed it all. "You're listed as co-owner and co-borrower, ma'am," the banker said. "You can do that." And that's when I realized, I wasn't powerless after all. I whispered a simple thank you to the banker before hanging up the phone. By noon my son would discover the locks no longer recognized him. By the end of the week, though, the real surprise would arrive, when the bank called. And I wouldn't be there to see it. I wouldn't be hiding, just quiet. Quiet had been my way my entire life. But now it was my silence that would thunder louder than any shout. That house wasn't some miracle that fell into our laps. It wasn't a gift and it wasn't luck. It was built piece by piece, brick by brick, check by check, sacrifice by sacrifice. I remember it clearly. 1987. The winter snow was heavier than usual and heating bills nearly crushed us. That's when my husband and I signed the very first mortgage papers. My hands shook so badly the ink smudged a little as I pressed my name across the line. I had insisted on being a co-owner, not because I didn't trust him but because, truthfully, his credit was in ruins. He had just shut down a failed auto repair shop, and every bank in town had already turned him away. But me. I had stability. For over 10 years, I had worked steadily as a medical clerk at the local clinic. My income was reliable. My credit was spotless. My name opened the door, my signature secured the loan, and my name went right onto the deed. We didn't talk much about it afterward. He was proud, but quietly so. Still, I'll never forget when we planted our first hydrangeas in the yard. He leaned down, brushed the dirt from his hands, and whispered, "We built this together, you and me." And he was right. We did. Month after month, payment after payment, even when it meant skipping dinners out or foregoing Christmas presents. Sometimes we patched holes in the roof with duct tape and grit instead of hiring help. But we never once missed a payment. The bank statements came addressed to both of us. The mailbox always knew we were equals. Then came 2012 and everything shifted. The strong man who once carried me across puddles could barely lift a coffee cup. Illness came like a thief. Medical bills piled up. Insurance barely made a dent, and Social Security trickled in too little too late. So I picked up the slack. I took on more hours at the clinic, switched to night shifts, stretched grocery bags until they nearly tore. On weekends I even scrubbed other people's houses, my hands raw and cracked beneath cheap gloves. But I never let him see how much it hurt. And I never once burdened Andrew. Andrew had just started a family of his own. He was trying to build something too. So I told him we were fine. I told him not to worry, even when I was counting nickels just to keep the gas tank from hitting empty. When he noticed how tired I looked, I brushed it off, blamed it on age. He never pressed further. Sometimes I wonder, maybe that was my mistake. Maybe if I had let him glimpse the weight I carried, he would have respected me more. Or maybe not. Maybe it wouldn't have mattered at all. Either way, I chose silence. I thought protecting him was the right thing. And years later he repaid me by throwing me out of the very house my name had helped build. It wasn't just an insult, it was erasure. They acted as though it was theirs, strutting through the rooms like royalty ruling over a kingdom they hadn't earned. His wife took over completely. New curtains, new paint in the living room, remodeling the kitchen, never once asking my opinion. She called it her domain. And I let her believe it. I didn't want war. I wanted peace. I told myself that if I gave them space they would give me respect. Instead, all I got were orders. I remember one evening not so long ago, I was dusting the bookshelf when she turned to me and said, "You really should ask before touching things. We're trying to keep the aesthetic consistent." Her words stung, but not as much as the truth behind them. That was my bookshelf. My books. Even the shelf itself had been built by my husband's hands. I went back to my room, closed the door, and for the first time in years I cried. Not because of her comment, but because I finally saw what was coming. She was rewriting the story. And Andrew let her. He began calling it their house in conversations. He stopped asking for my thoughts on anything. He looked at me as though I was just another relative who stayed too long, a tolerated guest but never truly welcome. And I said nothing. I didn't flash documents in their faces or make a scene. But I didn't throw anything away either. Every mortgage paper, every deed copy, every payment slip, I kept them tucked neatly in a manila folder in the bottom drawer of my desk. When my husband passed, I gathered that folder, placed it in a safe deposit box, along with the backup will and the letter he had written to me just in case. I had spent my whole life protecting Andrew, but I had protected myself too. So when they slammed the door in my face, convinced they had finally taken control, they had no idea the truth I carried. They didn't understand the history. To them, the house was nothing more than wood, drywall, and a coat of paint. But it wasn't. It was ink on paper, names on a deed, and one of those names was still mine. A week before he passed, my husband called me into our bedroom while Andrew and his wife were out shopping. He was lying in bed, thinner than I had ever seen him, his flannel pajama top hanging loose over bones that once carried me across puddles. But his eyes, they were sharp. Sharper than they had been in weeks. "Come sit," he whispered, patting the edge of the mattress. I sat down. Slowly, he reached into the drawer beside him and pulled out a small brown envelope. He placed it in my hands. "Don't open it now," he said. "And don't tell Andrew it exists. Not unless—" He broke off into a cough. "Not unless what?" I asked softly, leaning closer. He looked at me for a long-waited moment. "Not unless he hurts you." The words knocked the breath out of me. "Hurts me? What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, struggling for air, "I've seen the way he speaks to you. The way she treats you. And how he lets her." I swallowed hard. My heart wanted to protect him from worry even then. "You're overthinking," I whispered. "He's just stressed." But my husband shook his head. His voice, though weak, was steady. "You've been too generous with your forgiveness. That's why I had the papers drafted. The lawyer added a clause just in case. If I go first and they turn on you, I want you protected." My grip tightened on the envelope. "What's inside?" "A second will. A supplemental clause. It's notarized. If Andrew ever insults you, abuses you, or tries to evict you, he loses every claim, every penny, every title, every right." My hands trembled. He continued, "I didn't want it to come to this. But I need to know that even if I'm not here, you'll have control. That you'll have justice." My eyes burned. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "Thank you. But I hope I never need it." A faint smile crossed his lips. "Me too." He died 5 days later. The funeral was simple, cold, and over too quickly. Some old colleagues came, a few friends. Andrew barely spoke. His wife, loud, dramatic, sobbed harder than anyone, though she had only known him for 10 years. I kept my silence, clutching the folded flag they handed me and the last photograph we had taken together. And in my coat pocket I kept that sealed envelope pressed close to my chest. The next morning I went straight to the bank. The woman at the front desk, her name tag said Melinda, recognized me. "Safe deposit box?" she asked kindly. I nodded. "Box 221 under Eileen Carter." She checked my ID, handed me the key, and led me into a small private room. I unlocked the box and placed the envelope inside, along with the supplemental will, a USB stick with scanned mortgage papers, and a copy of the original title. On the folder I wrote "in case of emergency." Then I closed the lid and locked it all away. I told myself I didn't want to think about it again. I couldn't imagine a world where my son would make me use it. But that world arrived sooner than I thought. 3 days after the slap, I went back to the bank. Melinda wasn't there this time. A young clerk, barely 20 by the look of him, helped me. He spoke with a gentleness that surprised me. "In need of access?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Box 221. He led me into the same private room. I opened the box and paused, my hands steady this time. The first thing I pulled out was the letter. The paper edges had yellowed slightly, but my husband's handwriting was still clear, steady, familiar. "To my dearest Eileen," it began. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And if you're reading this because Andrew did what I prayed he never would, then I'm sorry. But you must remember, you are not powerless. You are not invisible. This house is yours as much as it was mine. Your hands built it. Your sacrifice paid for it. And no one, especially not our son, can take that away." A lump rose in my throat as I kept reading. "There is a clause in the supplemental will. You know it. Use it if you must. Don't let guilt keep you silent. You've spent a lifetime holding this family together. Let this be the moment you stop." It was signed and dated, October 14, 2020, just weeks before his final hospital stay. Beneath the letter I unfolded the supplemental will. It was all there in black and white. I was named the executor and custodian of the estate. And in one very specific clause, in the event that my son Andrew Carter physically or verbally abuses my wife Eileen Carter, or attempts to evict her from the family home, all inheritance rights shall be null and void. The estate shall then transfer to a designated trust under Eileen's sole control. Signed. Witnessed. Notarized. Ironclad. I sat in that quiet vault room for a long time, breathing in the stillness. I never wanted this power. But they had forced it into my hands. They forgot something crucial. Being quiet is not the same as being careless. I returned the papers to the box, slipped the USB into my purse and told myself I'd send the files to the lawyer later that day. Along with the recording I'd made the night of the slap. Because I hadn't just taken his words. I had preserved them. His voice was crystal clear. This isn't your home anymore. Get out. And that was all the proof I needed. Proof. Purpose. My husband had armed me with both, and now it was my turn to prepare the reckoning. The next morning I headed straight to the bank. The snow had hardened overnight into a glassy layer of ice, and each step on the sidewalk demanded care. But I didn't shuffle or hesitate. I walked steady, deliberate, like someone who knew exactly why she was there. I was finished with stumbling, finished with shrinking into silence for the sake of keeping peace. By 9:05 a.m., I was seated in a small glass-walled office across from a young woman with kind eyes and a burgundy blazer. Her name tag read Jessica. She scanned the form I had filled out, curiosity flickering in her gaze. "You'd like to cancel the automatic mortgage payments, Mrs. Carter?" she asked. "Yes," I answered, my voice firm. "And I'd also like access to the full loan file. Originals if possible." Jessica blinked, hesitant. "We can prepare certified copies for you. But, are you aware this action may affect?" "I'm the co-borrower," I cut in. "The loan was taken under both my late husband's name and mine. I have full authority to withdraw authorization. You'll see my signature on every page." She hesitated, fingers tapping across the keyboard. Then she nodded. "You're correct. And you're listed as co-owner on the property title as well." "I know," I said evenly. "Please bring me the documents." Jessica excused herself, and when she returned she set a thick manila folder on the table. My name was neatly typed across the tab. I couldn't help but smile faintly. 35 years of payments, renewals, statements, every single one carrying my name. My life bound together in paper. It took less than 10 minutes to sign the revocation form. 10 minutes to undo what they had all believed was permanent. Jessica slid the folder toward me. "Anything else I can do for you, Mrs. Carter?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Flag the account. No one is to make payments or renegotiate terms without my written consent. Not Andrew. Not his wife. No one." Her kind eyes softened, but her tone remained professional. "Understood. We'll lock the account." As I left, the winter wind caught the hem of my coat and sent it billowing behind me. I pulled it close around my body, but inside I felt something warmer than any wool could give. Assurance. Not anger, not spite, but a quiet certainty. I had been preparing for this moment long before I knew I would need it. Back in the little one-room apartment I had rented by the month, I sat down at the small desk, opened my laptop and plugged in the USB my husband had left me. The folder opened instantly. Every document was there, labeled, sorted, indexed with meticulous care. That was his way. At the bottom I added one more file, the recording from the night Andrew slapped me. I hadn't meant to record it, just as I hadn't meant to record so many other things after my husband's stroke. But once sickness entered our home I had gotten into the habit. Doctor's instructions, medication changes, grocery lists. I recorded them all. That night, the small device in my pocket had captured something else. Andrew's voice, sharp and cruel, the slap, the words that burned in my chest even now. "This isn't your home anymore. Get out." I uploaded the recording to a secure drive and sent it along with the will and mortgage files to the lawyer who had once helped my husband draft the supplemental clause. The subject line was short but heavy. Urgent. Activation of Clause 17B. Within 5 minutes my phone rang. "Mrs. Carter?" "Yes. This is Megan Dale. I've reviewed your email and attachments." Her voice was calm, steady, professional. "I want to say first, I'm sorry for what you endured. But more importantly, you've handled this exactly as you should." I stayed silent, waiting. Clause 17B is valid. The audio confirms both verbal abuse and attempted eviction. By the terms of your husband's will, your son forfeits all inheritance rights immediately. My throat tightened. "You can act on this now?" "Yes," she said firmly. "I'll file the notice today. We'll issue a cease-claim letter to your son's attorney and freeze all estate disbursements. Do you have somewhere safe to stay?" "For now," I replied softly. "Good. I'd like us to schedule a formal review later this week." But tonight, Mrs. Carter, rest assured, you are no longer powerless. Her words carried weight I hadn't realized I was desperate to hear. When I hung up, I sat by the window in the armchair of that modest apartment. Outside, the night was quiet. No traffic, no slammed doors, no passive-aggressive sighs over dinner. Just silence. But not the silence of being dismissed. The silence of freedom. I thought of my husband then. How he had worried, not about dying but about leaving me behind in the hands of a son who had forgotten what it meant to care. I had forgiven Andrew so many times. Missed birthdays, sharp tempers, little betrayals. I told myself that was what mothers did. But now I wasn't just a mother. I was a woman carrying proof and purpose. And this time forgiveness wasn't going to save him. I used to believe love meant endurance. That to love someone was to absorb their sharp edges, to keep the peace by swallowing your own pain. But real love, I know now, should never mean erasing yourself. I had done that far too long. The day after our call, Megan filed the documents. The court wasted no time. A preliminary freeze on the estate went into effect. Andrew would receive notice within 48 hours. At the same time, the bank processed my request to suspend the mortgage payments. Any future attempt to resume those payments would trigger an alert and be flagged as unauthorized. In the sterile language of finance and law, I had become something solid, an unscalable wall. A legal, financial, and emotional wall Andrew could not climb. I didn't call him. I didn't warn him. I just moved in silence, each step deliberate, because sometimes the sharpest power a woman holds is her memory. Everything they counted on her forgetting, she remembers. The first glimpse I had of what was happening came unexpectedly. I was at the pharmacy waiting for my prescription when the young clerk, who used to babysit my neighbor's twins, tilted her phone toward me. "Mrs. Carter, I didn't know you moved out. Your daughter-in-law's been posting about the renovations." I leaned in. And there it was. A glossy photo of the living room where my husband and I once danced on our 25th anniversary. Stripped bare, remodeled with new floors, pale curtains, and a cream sectional. The caption read, "Fresh start. Goodbye to the darkness. Hello to our forever home." Darkness. That was me. That was what she had called me. I smiled faintly, thanked the girl, collected my bag, and walked back to my little apartment without a word. But inside, something settled. Not anger, not even sadness, but clarity. They believed they had already won. They thought I had melted away, irrelevant, like an old coat finally donated to charity. They had no idea what was coming. The posts kept flooding in. A remodeled kitchen, a sparkling chandelier, Andrew posing with a sign that said, "Love lives here." Friends gathered for wine nights at the dining table my husband had built with his own 2 hands. And still, not one message, not one phone call, not even the smallest thank you for the decades I had poured into that house. But exactly 31 days after I stopped the mortgage payments, the notice went out. The bank, always efficient, mailed a formal letter to the Carter residence. Subject: Default Notice. Due to the co-borrower's revocation of authorization and failure to meet scheduled obligations, the mortgage is in breach of contract. If not resolved within 15 business days, the property will be subject to foreclosure. I didn't need to be there to see their faces. I could picture it clearly. The silence as the envelope was opened, the disbelief melting into confusion, confusion flaring into anger, and then the slow horror when they realized the truth. They had never read the fine print. They had dismissed me as nothing but an old woman with no teeth left to bite. But they were wrong. I was the teeth. I was the signature. I was the name beside their dream. And I was the reason it was unraveling. That evening, Andrew's name appeared on my phone for the first time in more than a month. For a moment I considered ignoring it. But I wanted to hear his voice. Just once. I answered, "Mom." His voice was raw, almost childlike. Not angry yet, just confused. I don't understand. We got this letter about the house. Something about foreclosure. What's going on? Did you do something to the payments?" I let 3 full seconds pass before I answered. "Yes." Silence. Then, "Why?" His voice cracked. "Why would you do that? We're going to lose the house." I didn't reply. "Mom, please," he pressed. I could hear it then, the ragged, uneven breath of a man realizing he was not untouchable. We didn't mean it. Things were just... Emotions were high after Dad's funeral. We weren't thinking. That line, "we weren't thinking," I'd heard it before. It was always what they said when they wanted to erase the harm, when they wanted to rewrite the choice after it was made. Please, he whispered. We can fix this. Just tell the bank it was a mistake. Restart the payments. We can talk. We can work something out. I closed my eyes. His voice was the same voice that had told me this isn't your home anymore. The same voice that stayed silent while his wife stripped my life from those walls and painted over it in beige. I can't, I said simply. But it's your house too, he pleaded. No, I interrupted, calm as glass. You told me it wasn't. Remember. The silence on the other end told me he did. I didn't wait for more. I pressed the red button, ended the call, and blocked his number. That night, I sat by the window in my small apartment, listening to the hum of traffic. And for the first time in a long while, the noise of the world felt like comfort. I wrapped my hands around a warm cup of chamomile tea, letting the steam rise against my face, and pulled a blanket across my lap. Hurting him had never brought me satisfaction, but protecting myself that carried a quiet peace. They had all believed the game was already theirs, but the truth was, they never even knew the rules I was playing by. I deliberately arrived late. By the time I walked in, the so-called family meeting was already in progress at my sister-in-law's house, chosen of course as neutral ground. A long table stretched across the living room, dressed up with coffee, neat plates of lemon cookies, like we were hosting some cheerful garden party instead of what really felt like an execution. Andrew sat at the head of the table, his wife beside him in a pale pink blazer, her smile brittle as porcelain, perfect on the surface but hollow underneath. The moment I opened the door, every voice stopped mid-sentence. I didn't apologize for being late. I didn't greet anyone. With my tote slung over one shoulder, coat still on, boots dripping melted snow onto their polished tile, I walked straight to the center of the room. I offered no excuses, no explanations. I simply lowered my bag, unzipped it, and began laying out the truth piece by piece. 1, 2, 3, 4. Each item placed with deliberate care. The original will, the supplemental will, a USB with the audio recording, and a notarized copy of the mortgage agreement. The air grew heavy with silence as I took my seat directly across from Andrew. His eyes were wide already, while his wife gripped her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. I folded my hands in my lap and glanced toward Megan, my lawyer, who had arrived a quarter of an hour before me just as I'd asked. She stood with perfect composure. Thank you all for coming, she said smoothly. I represent Mrs. Eileen Carter, widow of the late Mr. Thomas Carter. The purpose of this meeting is to formally disclose legal updates concerning Mr. Carter's estate. Andrew's hand shot up, his face already flushed. Wait, why now? I thought everything was all ready. Please let me finish, Megan cut in without so much as a blink. He fell silent. She lifted the supplemental will. This document, signed and notarized in 2020, includes Clause 17b. It states that if the heir, Andrew Carter, engages in verbal abuse, physical harm, or any attempt to evict Mrs. Eileen Carter, all inheritance rights will be revoked immediately. Gasps spread around the room. Somewhere a cousin muttered, eviction? Megan gave a steady nod. We have submitted audio evidence of Mr. Andrew Carter stating, "This isn't your home anymore. Get out." This was recorded only hours after Mr. Carter's funeral. Andrew shot up so fast his chair toppled backward. That was taken out of context. Unbothered, Megan pulled a small speaker from her bag and pressed play. My son's voice echoed through the room, loud, unmistakable. This isn't your home anymore. Get out. Then the sharp crack of a slap. Silence followed. Every gaze shifted between me and him, stunned into stillness. Andrew's face twisted like he'd taken a blow to the stomach. I remained silent, I didn't need words. His voice had already condemned him. Megan stopped the recording. As a result, under the terms of this will, Mr. Carter forfeits all claims to the estate. Full ownership of assets, including the family home, will transfer to Mrs. Eileen Carter. She may choose to enforce this ruling or negotiate. Legally, the decision is entirely hers. I looked slowly around the table. The aunts and uncles who had watched me be cast out in silence, the cousins who never called, the family who had always treated me like background scenery in my own story. Now they were seeing me finally. Now they had to listen. Andrew collapsed back into his chair, trembling. Mom, please. I didn't mean it. I was grieving. You know me. You know I wouldn't. You did, I interrupted, voice calm but unshakable. You said it in front of your wife, in front of your father's body. And you didn't stop there. You changed the locks. You posted pictures of my kitchen bragging about your forever home. You knew exactly what you were doing. His wife opened her mouth to defend him, but Megan silenced her with a raised hand. This is not a debate. The law is clear. Andrew buried his face in his palms. I'm going to lose everything. I leaned forward just enough for him to hear the edge in my words. You already did. When his bloodshot eyes finally lifted to mine, he whispered, I'm your son. I held his gaze. And I was your mother. But you treated me like a tenant. Silence fell heavier than before. I gathered my documents, slid them back into the tote and stood. No one tried to stop me. My boots clicked softly on the tile as I walked toward the door. Just once I turned back. I didn't come here for revenge, I said evenly. I came here with the truth. What you choose to do with it, that's on you. And with that I left. I didn't slam the door. The silence was punishment enough. That night the rain fell hard. I heard the knock before I saw them. 3 soft taps, hesitant, followed by silence. Then another, almost uncertain, as if they couldn't decide whether to try again or leave. I opened the door slowly. Andrew stood there in the hallway of my apartment building, soaked to the bone, water dripping down his collar. His wife hovered behind him, eyes red-rimmed but dry. He looked older, years older than the last time I saw him, though barely a month had passed. He wasn't even wearing a coat. Mom, his voice cracked. I said nothing. I didn't know where else to go, he stammered. They said the house, the foreclosure, the letter. I tried to stop it, but they told me I wasn't authorized, that payments were suspended, that I had no standing. You don't, I answered flatly. His face crumpled, and right there on the worn carpet outside my door he dropped to his knees. Please, Mom. I'm sorry. We're sorry. His wife lowered her head but stayed standing, clutching her purse to her chest like a shield. For the first time she didn't look like a woman in control. She looked cornered by her own consequences. I made a mistake, he whispered. We both did. Our pride got in the way. We thought we were doing what was best, but we were cruel. We were wrong. I stayed still, unmoved. Please, Mom. If you could talk to the bank, reinstate the mortgage, let us take over payments. We'll pay everything. We'll fix it. You can come home or not, whatever you want. Just don't let us lose the house. I opened the door wider, but I didn't invite them in. Instead, I stepped past them into the hallway, reached into my purse and pulled out a folded document inside a clear sleeve. This, I said, placing it in Andrew's trembling hands, is the deed transfer. As of yesterday, the house is no longer mine. His brows pulled together in confusion. What? I sold it, I answered. To who? His wife snapped, panic cutting through her voice. To the Elder Protection Foundation, I said evenly. They're converting it into a transitional home for senior women who've been displaced. Women like me. Andrew's mouth fell open but no sound came out. His voice broke to a whisper. You sold it. I nodded. Cash buyer. Immediate transfer. It's done. His hands shook as he clutched the paper. But why? That was our home. I met his eyes. No, it was never yours. It was built by me and your father, paid for with my double shifts, my sacrifices, my silence. You lived in it, you used it, but it wasn't yours. His wife finally found her words. That was a mistake, okay? We went too far. You should have talked to us. I did talk, I said, my voice calm but steady. Every dinner where I was dismissed. Every time you rolled your eyes when I spoke. Every time you walked past me like I was part of the furniture. I spoke. You just never listened. Andrew stared down at the floor, shoulders trembling. I don't want your apology, I told him. I want your understanding. His tears came freely. I do understand. I was wrong. I looked at him, my son. The boy who once scribbled Mother's Day cards with crayons, who once held my hand crossing streets, who once ran into my arms after school. Now he was kneeling in a hallway begging. But me. I had already stood up. I forgive you, I said softly. But I won't fix this for you. He nodded slowly, painfully. As I turned to go back inside, I left him with one last truth. I didn't keep the house. I kept my peace. I closed the door and for the first time in years I locked it, not to keep people out but to keep peace in. With part of the sale money, I bought a small cabin by a lake in Alaska. Not the picture-perfect kind you see on postcards. No shiny renovations, no hot tubs, no curated corners for social media. Just 4 sturdy walls, a wood stove, and a view so wide it made the silence feel like music. The first morning I woke there, I stepped barefoot onto the porch with coffee warming my hands and watched the mist drift across the water. The quiet was so deep I could hear my own breath. No locks. No slammed doors. No voices demanding I justify my existence. Just me, the trees, and a sky so endless it shrank the past to nothing. For the first time in decades I slept through the night. No dreams of shouting. No echoes of slammed doors. Just sleep, just peace. I unpacked slowly, one box at a time. I hadn't brought much, only what mattered. A photo of my husband smiling in the garden. The crocheted blanket I made during his chemo days. A file folder, thick now with copies of my life. And a small black digital recorder. The one that had captured the moment they tried to erase me. Now it would help me reclaim the rest. I set my laptop on a desk by the window, plugged in the recorder and pressed play. Andrew's voice filled the empty room again. But this time I didn't flinch. I'd already lived through worse. I opened a blank document and began to write. About the hydrangeas we planted back in '89. About the winter the roof caved under heavy snow, and how we fixed it together with borrowed ladders and prayer. About the day Andrew was born. The first time he called me Mom. I didn't write to blame. I wrote to remember. To give myself back the years I had folded myself small just to keep peace. That evening I sent my first audio file to Grandma's True Stories. Raw, unpolished. My voice, the one that had been silenced too long. In that first recording I said, getting older made me invisible. But invisibility isn't weakness. It's silence collecting power. And silence doesn't mean surrender. It means preparation. I didn't lose a home. I reclaimed a world. So if you're listening, if you've ever been pushed out of the very life you helped build, know this. You are not alone. And you are not done. I didn't expect anyone to hear it. But they did. The comments started coming. Other women. Other grandmothers. Other silent rooms. I thought I was the only one. You said what I've been holding inside for years. Thank you for speaking what I couldn't. Slowly my silence turned into something else. A choir. A community. A quiet army of women who had nothing left to prove, but everything left to say. I still live in that cabin. I still rise with the light, drink my coffee slow and let peace linger. Sometimes I think of Andrew. Of the house. Of what could have been. But then I remember what I lost was made of walls. What I gained was made of truth. And truth doesn't rot. It waits. And when it finally speaks, it doesn't scream. It simply doesn't stop. So if you've ever been hurt by those who were meant to protect you, remember this. Silence is not weakness. Welcome to Grandma's Honest Stories, where the forgotten find their voice again.